Okay, I'm a preacher's kid. We call them PKs, only times two. Uh, my mom and dad met at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth. Dad was a Texan minister, well, became a minister in Disciples of Christ. My mother was a Methodist who grew up in Huntington Park and was a member of Huntington Park Methodist Church. So after undergrad, both of them went to seminary, different seminaries. Dad went to Andover Newton outside of Boston, and mom went to the Hartford Seminary, where she got a degree in religious education. Dad was a Disciples parish minister. Mom was an intermittent religious ed director under the twofer plan. And people who've been around long enough know that twofer means you hire one minister and the wife's skills and effort come for free. So, after serving churches in Iowa and Texas, they went to Sacramento, finally ended up in Stockton at First Christian Church in Stockton. My dad was in the ministry, parish minister, 20 years, and he became a prison chaplain for another 20 years. When he left First Christian, we did the same thing Methodists do. You can't hang around the church where you were. So we wandered 40 months between various progressive Protestant congregations until we finally landed at Central Methodist in Stockton. Being a preacher's kid, I've known more ministers probably than most people have, and I've been fortunate to know a lot of them who helped shape me in the religious side of my life. The ones that impacted me the most were those who were concerned less with whether you held the correct theological positions than the folks who took the name Christian seriously and wanted folks to take on not just the name, but also the voluntary commitments to serve others around them. For me, the exemplar of this was Don Fado, Sacramento pastor that we just lost a couple of months ago. About 1998, our daughter came out to us as gay. At that same time, Ellie Charlton and Jean Barnett went to their pastor at St. Mark's in Sacramento, who just happened to be Don Fado. They told him they'd like to be married or holy unioned, and Don agreed to do the service. So on January 16th, 1990, Don joined Ellie and Jean as a couple, and behind him were 68 United Methodist clergy co-officiants, they were probably efficient too, as well as pastors from a number of other religious groups. This was an act some called ecclesiastical disobedience against the United Methodism's 1972 ban on ordained clergy performing same-sex weddings or marriages. Those who knew Don knew that he was an extremely bright guy. He knew his actions were against the rules and would likely bring trouble his direction. But he felt it was the right thing to do, and so he did it. At the service, my wife, our daughter Jordan, and I were in the audience of 1,200 invited witnesses. Years before, our daughter was turned off to church when in church youth class, some boys were trash talking gays, and an adult who was present said absolutely nothing. Needless to say, Jordan carried antipathy toward the church for some time after that. However, after witnessing the service led by Don and his fellow ministers, Jordan, when she became ready to marry a woman, she was first holy unioned by a United Methodist pastor. I have to think that her attending that service that Don led gave her a more positive view of Methodism. I have no idea if Don would ever have claimed to be fearless, but he was willing to take risks in order to do the right thing. Throughout his life, he stepped up and followed through in actions supporting the LGBTQIA community. Don also marched with Dr. King and long supported civil rights in a number of ways. And he was also active in feeding and housing the less fortunate. Another and shorter Don story. About 8 years ago, my wife and I joined 20 others on a trip that Don and his wife Jean organized, a trip traversing the Panama Canal by catamaran. The trip included visits to some countries where the United States had, historians will tell us, contributed to the poverty and disarray that we are now reaping with the immigration of folks fleeing poverty and violence in Central America. Throughout that tour, Don wasn't afraid to raise and encourage the hard questions so many others avoid. So, yes, I've been a great fan of Don's. Growing up in the parsonage, I'm aware that sometimes people put you in nasty positions. After my dad died, I found in his papers, a carbon copy of a note he wrote to Mrs. V in the church he was in. He said, "Mrs. V, no, Martin Luther King is not a communist. He is a Christian minister doing what Christian ministers are supposed to do." These days, Christians don't get thrown to the lions in the Colosseum, but parishioners and those outside the church as well are watching, and they are listening. When we have religious leaders spouting what many of us know has nothing to do with Jesus' teaching, like linking Christianity with America first, it's important we hear strong Christian voices respond, speaking out, saying this is wrong. So I'd encourage ministers to have courage. Definitely rely on your compatriots in that to mutually support, but to have courage to speak out. And I'd also encourage parishioners to learn and to let our pastors know that we have their backs when they stick their necks out.